Recording. All right.
All right.
Welcome to another edition of the Bebo Knows podcast. This is edition 135. This is your host, Brian Bullock. And with me for the annual NFL preview podcast is the one and only Seth Burn. Welcome back, Seth.
Thanks, Brian. As always, it's good to be here.
And so I just woke somebody up here. She just happened to hear that I was starting to record. So everyone say hi to Panther.
Hey, Panther, I'm so sorry for waking you.
Whenever I get a work call, the cats tend to gravitate towards the laptop to distract me as I'm looking something up for a customer. So it's just kind of a normal procedure here. I think you know how that goes with cats.
Please.
All right, well, let's get into it. So, like I said, the annual 2023 or the annual podcast is the 2023 edition. We have our random topics for the pod. So I guess one of the easier topics to kind of go over would be just kind of a review of the draft from back in April. So if you want to provide like some brief discussion on the draft, your overall impressions. I know you actually had like a little like article or a post on your.
I did do a thing of draft snippets. But sure, let's go quickly.
Sure.
When there was the trade when Carolina traded up from 9-1 with Chicago. I mean, Chicago would put the pick for sale. We weren't sure necessarily who was going to trade up for it. And so when they did, given Frank Reich's history as a coach, we figured they were going to go for the bigger guy, going to take CJ Stroud. And then somehow word must have leaked. The market moved. And Bryce Young became the favorite. That surprised me. And I ended up losing some money on that, but not as much money as I could have lost. Because at some point they decided pretty quickly that it was just a lock. And so they took those odds off the board. And it annoyed me at the time, but worked out for the best. In terms of actually football-wise, he's a size outlier. He's much smaller and thinner than anyone who's come before him. Like we've had guys his height before, but they've all been thicker. And so it'll be interesting, but this is kind of the new NFL where small can work. The real thing, the part when the draft went off the rails. Actually, let me talk briefly about the second pick. I was very happy CJ Stroud went second.
Because you still know ball basically is what.
That was the question. Like before the draft, Will Levis was favored to go in the top 4, and CJ Stroud, if I recall correctly, wasn't. And Levis was supposed to go before Stroud. Like there were direct bets which guy would come off the board first, and Levis was the clear favorite. And I was like, just no, absolutely not. And I would have gone down. I would have gone down with the ship with that one if that one had lost. But thank goodness it didn't. So yeah, I was very, very happy with Houston for taking him second. I think it was the right decision. But then things went off the rails, and again, it involved Houston. They traded up from number 12 to get up to number 3 to take defensive end Will Anderson. Now, he was my top player on the board, regardless of position. But you don't trade up to number 3, giving up effectively like a first overall pick in terms of just total amount of trade value to grab a defensive end. I mean, edges matter, but they don't matter that much. That's the kind of trade you make to grab your franchise quarterback. And it was just an insane decision. And apparently, it kind of leaked beforehand, and people were skeptical. Like Hager in the NFL saw it as like, nah, that can't be right. And it turned out it was right. I would have been. I didn't see it beforehand, but I would have been with Hager, and I was like, yeah, there's no way that's going to happen. It happened. And apparently, the internal logic was that the Texans were split. Half the brain trust wanted Stroud and half the brain trust wanted Anderson. And so they reached out to Arizona, and they kind of had an agreement before the draft, and they finalized it during the draft that they would trade up 3. They would take the quarterback first, because if they'd taken Anderson first, then other teams might have tried to trade up to grab Stroud, which, by the way, should be their hint to not do this trade.
Yeah.
So they took Stroud, traded up, got Anderson, made everyone happy, and gave up a shitload of draft capital, like the next year's first round picks and such, to get a defensive end. So I don't know. That seemed like lunacy to me, but the Texans are a pretty dumb franchise, so kind of par for the course for them. Then we had Anthony Richardson go forth. That also made me very happy. Not in the no ball situation, just because I thought he was awesome. Like, he was the one guy who I viewed as the high ceiling in the draft. And so that was pretty great. What other notes? Let's see. So we had 2 running backs go in the top 12. The first time was a tragedy. The second time it was a comedy. Like, there was expectations that Bijan Robinson had been linked to the Falcons. They love running the ball. Their offensive line is built for run blocking. And to be fair, they were very successful running the ball last year with running backs less accomplished or with less upside than Robinson. And so, like, I don't approve of it, but I understand it. And then the Lions, who had traded back from number 6 overall with Arizona, they took Jahmyr Gibbs at 12, and that was just insane to me.
Yeah.
Like, I had Robinson as I think my number 3 overall player, but again, positional value, I would not have taken it anywhere near there. But like Gibbs, I think I had in the 20s. And I do not think Detroit made best use of their draft capital. I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay.
Like that. Like, they took a linebacker at 18th, and I think they took a safety early in the second round. And yeah, positional value can lick their balls. They just don't care.
Yeah. Now, I this is just kind of a random question I just thought of now, but has there ever been a time in your life where you were like, you had seen a running back drafted in the first round where you were like, you totally understood it and it made sense for like all parties, or has running back always been like a bad choice in first round?
I definitely cannot say it's always been a bad choice. I'm old enough to remember Barry Sanders back when I think he went like 2nd overall, but I'm not positive. Let's find out. But I remember he was awesome in college. Just, he was a different species. Let's see. He was drafted
3rd overall.
It was offensive rookie, 1989.
3rd overall.
3rd overall.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, I definitely would not have minded that selection. Let's see. It was Troy Aikman, Tony Mandarich, Barry Sanders. Who was the next running back? Oh, Tim Worley. Not quite as good. Sammy Smith. Not quite as good. Yeah, the Lions got the best running back in that draft. And other running backs, yeah, there have been plenty of times in my life when I've understood and perhaps even agreed with running back selections. But running back used to matter in a way that it doesn't now. You remember there was always discussions of Barry Sanders versus Emmitt Smith.
Yeah.
And the thing with Smith was he had an awesome offensive line with the Cowboys, and he was just running in a better situation. Also, he faced less stacked boxes because of Troy Aikman and Irvin and such as in their entire offense. So he had easier boxes to run against with a better offensive line. So it wasn't necessarily a fair fight between Sanders and Smith. I view Sanders as the significantly better running back, but Smith was pretty great too. And he was tough as nails. But the NFL has evolved. And we've come to realize that you can get running backs on day 3 and have them do the job. And I feel like this is a situation where the Lions took perhaps the top players on the board and are not properly viewing positional value. And by the way, the Eagles ended up getting the Lions' old running back at a very reasonable price. We'll see who has more success this season.
Okay. Yeah, and yeah, I didn't mean to go off a tangent, but yeah. So you mentioned Philadelphia. That was your next point here.
So Philadelphia, there was this guy, Jalen Carter, who had some off-field incidents, but was viewed as one of the top defensive players in the draft, a defensive tackle from Georgia. Awesome disruption, could be a potential star. And if not for these other issues, he probably goes in the top 5. and he fell all the way to ninth, at which point the Eagles traded up from 10th to ninth to grab him. And then later in the first round, there was a defensive end, Nolan Smith, who was a bit undersized, also from Georgia, who other teams might have felt was a bit narrow, bit too small to fit their specs. Philadelphia didn't mind, so they got two elite defensive players, two top prospects. Like Smith was the betting market before the draft had him, I think, going in the top 12 about half the time. So they got him, I want to say, at like 29th or 30th or whatever it was, but late in the draft.
Yeah.
And pretty awesome draft for Philadelphia, I have to say. They added a shitload of talent, which is not normally what happens when you lose the Super Bowl.
Okay. And then let's see. You were the last part here was related to any like fallout since the draft. Any noteworthy?
So have we really learned much since the draft? I would not say we've learned a lot. CJ Stroud made a terrible first impression. But after that, he looked fine. So I think Stroud, well, I would say we have not learned much from Stroud. I still expect him to be okay, but who the hell knows? And there's also this thing with Bryce Young, like preseason, they're not really trying to kill him. Once the regular season starts, all bets are off. Like,
sure,
they will hit him as hard as they can. So we'll see.
Yeah, and that's at least that's a pretty wide open division too. So I mean, it wouldn't be like the most shocking thing if they had a chance at a division title. But I mean,
it is. They certainly have a chance if they're any good. I just don't expect them to be.
Sure. Okay. All right. So the next part here, this was a tweet that you shared back in April. I made sure to thumbnail it here. It was relating to Lamar Jackson, and the exact tweet. I'm just gonna pull it up here. Was relating to it was like the popularity from Lamar Jackson among NFL executives, I believe.
So I mean, first of all, there might be some truth to the thesis that NFL executives were not a huge fan of him, because like before the draft, I desperately wanted the Jets to take him 6th overall, and they did not, obviously. And he fell all the way to 32nd, at which point Baltimore traded up to get him.
Yep.
So yeah, there was not initially a lot of respect for him. Then he was a unanimous MVP. But since then, he hasn't come close to reaching those heights. And so, okay, I get that there's skepticism about him, but I would also say Baltimore hasn't really done a great job of putting top talent around him, giving him a good chance to succeed. I think he's been great. Like, the delta between him and anyone else they put back there is sizable. So I feel like, yeah, I would have loved the Jets to make a run at him. That would have been my first choice.
Sure.
They did not. And no one else did either, which is the incredible thing. So Miami is invested in Tua, and the 49ers have their own issues. But just imagining Lamar Jackson on either of those offenses seems unfair, particularly San Francisco. Put Lamar with Shanahan, those weapons, and that offense could do things we've never seen before. Man, it didn't happen. And now he's stuck with, he's got OBJ and Rashad Bateman. So I don't know, maybe. I'm skeptical that's going to work out, but maybe.
Okay. And then, this was next topic here. Trying to get the cat out of the way here. All right. The next topic is going back to the running backs. So we kind of already touched base on the running backs here a little bit, and I know that, I mean, most people nowadays kind of know, at least the type of people that listen to this podcast, I consider like a little smarter than normal. I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing. Most people probably know that running backs aren't, very important or in the long term. You shouldn't invest a lot of capital or whatever.
Yeah, you should not invest a lot of resources in your running backs.
So what do you make about the market this year? Like, I think this year kind of like there was a lot of talk about I don't know why people are all of a sudden surprised about running backs being devalued. And I think you had shared something recently, or it might have been retweeted recently into my timeline about somebody who was talking about like positional value, and nobody was crying about like punters or guards
So
or like.
the tweet you're referencing, I think the original one was from Jim Trotter, and I'm trying to remember who it was who responded to him. Hold on a
It
second.
was somebody. I don't.
Yeah, it was
I didn't
T'Challa.
recognize his name. Yeah.
Yeah, T'Challa. Y'all never had this energy for punters, kickers, or interior O linemen because y'all inherently believe in positional value. It's this, that y'all grew up in an era where running backs mattered, and y'all can't handle that's not the case anymore. And he's right.
Yeah.
Running backs used to matter, and they don't now for the most part. And a lot of older people are having issues that they want these guys to get paid. And to be honest, I would like to see them get paid too. I just don't think they deserve to, or I don't think it's a good idea for the franchise to pay them, which is different from wanting them to get paid. Separate question.
Yeah, I could. It's one of those things where I totally understand both sides of the equation. I also think that if you're a parent right now or you're an athlete right now, you don't want to be you don't want to be an elite running back in high school anymore or college, even college.
The shine is certainly off. It used to be a great path, and now it's not the same way anyway.
Yeah, like if your goal is to have a lengthier NFL career with better chances of getting that second contract, I guess the running back isn't the way to go. I mean, I guess that there are, like you mentioned, there's this, McCaffrey was one of the exceptions to this. The Niners traded way more picks than I thought they should, but I guess it worked out okay last year, so I can't really complain. But most of the time, you're not going to see or you shouldn't see a team trading for like a Trent Richardson for a first round pick anymore.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, that was ridiculous even 11 years ago,
Yes.
whenever that was. And, they were tossing around Taylor for first, supposedly. Taylor, they're trying to get Taylor.
They wanted to set that as the price. That's what they were asking for.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, the rest of the league told them that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
Yeah, you could buzz off. They were talking about wanting Waddle or something from Miami. Like Miami's.
Oh, that is just absolutely hilarious. Like again, you can't get it if you don't ask. But obviously, Miami's going to say no, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of like I said, most people know now that running backs are more fungible than just about any position. But are you surprised that teams are avoiding spending a lot of money on them? Do you think do you think teams have gotten smarter in the last 5 or 10 years with that?
I do think they've gotten smarter in general, but we have seen we saw 2 running backs go in the top 12 last year. And I think we have to go back within 10 years for the last time that's happened. So it's not like this was a huge outlier, it was a surprise. But we've seen teams certainly show an interest in running backs. And there's this thing where perhaps obviously they've learned enough to not invest in older running backs, not invest in second contracts for the most part. But there still might be some interest in young guys who can still perform on their first deal back before they've taken all these hits. Because coaches still want to run the ball. That's part of a coaching DNA. Run the ball gently down the field.
Sure.
And they think getting an elite running back is important to doing that. So I would say there's been some evolution. I just don't think there's been enough evolution. I don't think they've fully grasped how much running backs don't matter.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the style of running back that got drafted in the top 12, I know from what I've heard that Gibbs is going to be more used as a kind of a wide receiver, kind of spread out more. So I don't know.
So that's what they're talking about. It's not likely to play out that way. It's hard. I mean, running backs are running backs that they can go outside. is nice, but it's hard to have that be their day job. Otherwise, they'd be wide receivers.
Sure.
Like even McCaffrey's awesome at it, but he's still mostly a running back.
Yeah, like McCaffrey, like I don't know if this would be accurate to say like he's more of like a wide receiver 3. Would you say? Like if he was gonna be like if they just put him in as a wide receiver, like I don't know if that's his skill level. I don't know. Obviously that's hard to say because he's.
I think he could do it. I don't think that's necessarily his best usage. I think it's good that he provides the versatility, but it is a thing he could do at a reasonable level.
So like, those are the types of guys that like you need to have like an extra set of skills for you to be like a running back that's worth that second contract. And I don't know. I'm guessing
to get that second contract, and we see guys who in theory have those skills trying to, like Austin Eckler of the Chargers was like, hey, I catch the ball too. Look at me. Yeah. And the Chargers was like, yeah, we're good. And so he demanded a trade and said, yeah, see what you can do, which is the team basically saying, look, you're going to go talk to other teams. They're not going to give you what you want. And also, they're certainly not going to give you what you want, given they also have to give us what we want.
Sure.
So, okay. He had no shot.
All right. And the last thing about running backs here. So how do you see the position evolving or devolving in the next 5 to 10 years within the NFL?
So one of the general things we've seen is smaller players finding success. Like we're pushing some size limits. We've seen that at wide receiver. We've seen it at quarterback. And we might see it at running back. But it's hard for me to actually expect that. And the reason for that is one of the things a running back has to do, or at least be able to do, is pass protect. He's got to be able to pick up a free blitzer, a free rusher.
Sure.
And if you can't trust him to do that, then his optionality is limited, and he kicks kind of what you're doing. He's either running the ball or running out into a pattern. So it's hard for running backs to get too small given their job requirements. So I would say the evolution, we might see more of him try to be like Christian McCaffrey, if only because he got paid. And I'm sure everyone noticed. Sure. And they also noticed who's not getting paid.
Yeah.
So, try to be like Christian.
Yeah, it's almost like the Steph Curry effect in NBA. Everyone's, chucking up threes from 35 feet or trying to. They're not going to.
They're trying to, but some of the guys actually have learned how, which is what's really impressive.
Sure. So that makes sense. So, okay. The next topic here was related to the Trey Lance stuff. Now, I'll fully admit that everything that played out with Trey Lance, I did not expect. Like, I'm still surprised that, he got so little time on the field. At the same time, the Niners, must have seen some stuff in practice that they didn't like, and they've put all their chips in on Purdy, and the fact that Lance was going to be even behind Darnold. Like I didn't believe that when they signed Darnold. I heard people saying that Lance was going to be the number 3, and I didn't believe it at the time, and now I'm just kind of okay, I guess I was totally wrong on that. But with how everything played out with Trey Lance, is it just because they're winning that Lynch and Shanahan seem so untouchable?
So I saw you ask that question before, and for me, I was kind of surprised even to see it because I think Shanahan came over in 2017. And in that time, they've been to 3 NFC Championship games, winning one of them. Yeah, they haven't won a Super Bowl in that time, but they've been one of the top teams in the NFC. They built a very deep and strong roster. Shanahan is clearly a well-respected offensive mind. I would say that certainly almost any team, apart from the Chiefs, would want Shanahan as their head coach. And in terms of Lynch, maybe he's had some issues, but he's also done clearly enough things right to be safe. So yeah, they're winning, and that will protect them.
Yeah, and
So if they stop winning, then things change.
yeah, I should specify like the topic came up like a few weeks ago when I said I can't recall a time in my life where a team, invested so much capital in a guy, like 2 years later gave up on him, and somehow, like if you just look at their net team chances from then to now, that they're actually better despite how badly they butchered that, like how badly that played out. And that's the thing that I'm most amazed by, more so than I guess Lynch, and Shanahan being untouchable, because I get it. They're winning, so that makes sense. But the fact that they're like somehow seemingly better than they were like before they traded for Lance and everything got screwed up with that. That's the thing that amazes me the most as a fan.
I guess I'd have to say that they are very lucky that Brock Purdy turned out to be worth those 3 first-round picks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it really comes down to. They found a guy who was able to do the job, and it would not have been the same issue. Like had Garoppolo stayed healthy, they might have gone to the NFC Championship game with him if he didn't get hurt. So the 49ers have been well coached. It's unclear how much of their quarterback success should be attributed to the quarterbacks themselves and how much should be attributed to the coaching staff. But they clearly believe in Purdy. They lost faith in Lance. And I don't really know what to expect from Darnold there. Hopefully we don't find out, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Hopefully we see Purdy for all 17 weeks.
That's the thing. Even if Purdy gets hurt, I guess maybe because of how Garoppolo and Purdy have played, that like somehow I feel like that they, because of like Shanahan's perceived coaching edges, that he can somehow make a better situation for Darnold than Darnold's had, in his previous stops. I guess Darnold did play okay.
I absolutely believe that's a possibility.
Like I could see Darnold playing like, it wouldn't shock me if Darnold played like Garoppolo did, where it's not, it's not like overwhelmingly good, but like, he gets the job done. If it comes to that, I guess is what I'm saying. So I guess I'm not really that worried about that. Surprisingly, which is weird to say about how Darnold looked at with the Jets, and that could be a condition of.
Well, Darnold is actually coming off his best season.
Yeah, true. He did have
asked to do a lot, which is I think the same in San Francisco. I don't think there's any scenario where he's asked to do. He's not going to be asked to be the hero.
Yeah, sure. So okay, well, let's go on to the next topic. You had a tweet that you shared with me a couple weeks ago about the offensive line, and based on the stuff that you have outlined here, I'm looking forward to hearing your enthusiasm about this tweet. So to touch base on it, there's a tweet from somebody named Deep Value Better that had like the only 2023 offensive line rankings you need, and it was like a list of 8 different sources: PFF, Madden, 4for4, 33rd Team, Action, FTN, Fantasy Pro, Sharp FB, and then ESPN. So like, yeah, I see all the stuff you have written down, so I'm just gonna let you take this away.
Okay. Let's start at the top. The first thing I wrote on the outline is I need to dedicate literal hours to breaking everything down, but this graphic tells me 6 different ways. The first one I want to talk about is the mobility of your quarterback should be independent of your run block win rate. And if you actually look at the graphic, and please don't do this at home, please don't look at the graphic, just trust me when I tell you they're clearly correlated, and that should not be the case. These things in actual practice are not related. What happens in real life is when you have a mobile quarterback, defenders are put in an awkward spot where they don't necessarily know where to go. Now, that does not mean that your offensive line blocked particularly well or poorly. It doesn't matter one way or the other. It means that you froze the defender, and whoever is the ball carrier now has a split-second advantage.
Sure.
So that's the first thing from that graphic that I had difficulty getting over. The second thing is, if you look at the level of variance in pass block success, I think it goes all the way down to 49%. And you have a couple teams at 49, which makes me slightly suspicious that they have some kind of baseline where it's hard to get lower than that. There's another one at 50, Cincinnati. And then it goes all the way up to 75% for Kansas City. And there's just not that much variance in offensive line success. Like, there's offensive lines that are terrible, and there's offensive lines that are really, really good. But I wouldn't say the difference between them in terms of pass block success is 25% on any given play.
Sure.
That's just not realistic. The game of football would be a much different game if that were true. And for the record, both of these pieces of data are from ESPN. So I appreciate that ESPN is trying to do a neutral, unbiased thing. This is not opinions. This is not people making shit up. This is presumably a next-gen stat. But I think there's a few bugs in the system. Now let's talk about the other sources. You have sources like the Action Network being treated as an expert, like Sharp Football. Madden, we get, is Madden. Madden's there mostly for giggles and laughs, whatever. That's fine. I have nothing against Madden. But like the 33rd Team, every time I looked at analysis from them, I just wanted to like kill myself. It's just terrible. It's awful. So like, yeah, they can fuck off with those sources. And then there's the depth ratings. If you check like 1 and 2, these are not among the good offensive line. This is like the Jets and the Bills, I think it is. That's not accurate. These are not the two deepest offensive lines in the NFL. I have no idea where they're getting that from. And then we have, all right, we need to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady was their quarterback for the last 2 years, which coincided in them leading the league in both adjusted sack rate and pressure allowed rate over each of those years. And the important thing about that is, yes, they had a good offensive line during much of that time, although not necessarily last year after injuries wrecked them, but it's a quarterback stat.
Sure.
A lot of these stats that, as presented, are not offensive line stats, which is a tough thing to isolate. It's something I've struggled with and worked on for years. But it has to be acknowledged that the quarterbacks are affecting a lot of these numbers in ways that they aren't necessarily recognizing or acknowledging.
And yeah, so as I'm reading that, for some reason it clicked in my head about like the baseball equivalent of like sometimes catchers will be judged by the like a guy stealing a base when it's really like a pitcher stat a lot of times.
Absolutely.
That's almost kind of the equivalent, I guess, in baseball. Maybe, I don't know. That's kind of
that is a fair thing where both of us are responsible for this job, but it's counting against me and not against you.
Sure.
And that's not an accurate description. Now, admittedly, this is not necessarily a fault of the graphic, but it doesn't affect whether or not it tilts me, which it does. And then finally, this is more of an LOL, but the Ravens Madden rating, like I have no clue what's going on there. Historically, that offensive line has had some bad stats, not even because of their quarterback, but because they've got wide receivers that have definitely broken open. So they've had to try and block for longer. And it's possible this has infected the Madden ratings in ways that are not necessarily accurate relative to their players' actual skills. So, but in any event, this is just a graphic that, oh God, just looking at it still makes me mad. There's even the color scheme. I didn't write that down, but even the color scheme.
So yeah, I here's the thing. I don't even know if I want to share this. What I'm going to say is for those people that want to search Twitter and just search tweets for that include Seth Burn and Brian Bullock, just to search for that. It's from a couple weeks ago. If you really want to,
August 17th.
Yeah, if you really want to seek it out, the tweet is from Seth saying we will need to talk about this, Brian Bullock. So I don't want to promote it any further than like what you've discussed here?
Well, I have nothing against Deep Value Better. Like, it's nice
Yeah.
to try and put together lots of information. I mean, full credit to him. It's unfortunate that these are the sources that were available. Whatever. Let's move on.
So I guess, a quick aside. Do you and you don't obviously have to go into it because I'm sure you don't want to, but do you have your own like rankings for offensive lines that like are kind of
This has been something that has been important to me for years, that I do, but I haven't been able to get to them to the point where I'm happy with the finished product.
Okay.
And that's because there's just so many variables. The stuff I mentioned, like with quarterbacks and everything else, and the fact that one offensive lineman, his play might be affected by another offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Like I focus on creating Pythag ratings where I can try to have some sense of value of how often, what percentage of these time these guys win their respective battles. And I have those for all the offensive linemen. And I have my own individual, like I mentioned, my individual offensive lineman rankings all the time in my NFL preview. So yeah, I do have the stuff. And does my analysis agree with what they're coming up with? No, but that I can't hold against them because I don't really publicize or publish my data. So it's like the grading them against my own internal rankings, I don't think would be particularly fair. I do disagree with their numbers, and I bet with my own.
Okay. So kind of tying into that topic of, projects, are there any new projects or items that you're diving into with regards to NFL analysis, like particular positional or positional skill?
I wish I had more free time. It's one of those things where it's just a factual thing. I have less free time every year. There's more responsibilities I got to deal with. But the one thing that if I had more free time is an analysis of defensive positions where defense is changing. We're seeing more flexibility. I don't want to say we were seeing positionless defenses, but we're seeing players with fluid positions, hybrids. Are they a linebacker? Are they a safety? Are they a linebacker? Are they a defensive end, or even like possibly even sometime rushing internally? So there's a lot of defensive flexibility, and it's one of those things where I'd love to start valuing that and try to figure out how much that's worth. But that would take a lot of time, and I don't necessarily know if the best use of my time. It is something that I think about, though.
Okay. All right, well, let's dive into the 2023. So some of these questions are kind of just recycled from previous years just because they're good, past fodder here. But in terms of new coaches, whether it be coordinators or head coaches, are you most excited to see in their new environments?
So for head coaches, there's one that's much more important than all the others, and that's Sean Payton taking over in Denver. That is an elite head coach in a situation where he's taking over from an absolute disaster and Nathaniel Hackett. So enormous coaching upgrade. But he's also presented with a huge challenge. Can he resurrect Russell Wilson? Like, is Russell Wilson still Russell Wilson? Was it Nathaniel Hackett's fault? Or is Russell Wilson washed? And I don't know the answer. We'll have to see. It is something that I'll be fascinated by. The other question that I'm wondering in terms of head coaches is a coach/coordinator thing. It's head coach Mike McCarthy in Dallas taking over the offense, which I view as potentially hilarious because I view Fat Mike as the worst coach to ever to win a Super Bowl. In terms of offensive coordinators, the former offensive coordinator in Dallas, Kellen Moore, is now with the Chargers. I think that gives the Chargers an offensive boost. I think Matt Nagy getting promoted in Kansas City with Eric Bieniemy going to Washington in a lateral move, by the way, because he couldn't get a head coaching job, is very interesting. Eyes will be on both of them to see whether or not the Kansas City offense is as dynamic, as creative as in previous years. I mean, you still have Andy Reid, obviously, and he gets a lot of the credit. And you have Patrick Mahomes, who's Mr. Top Right, so he gets a lot of credit automatically. In terms of Bieniemy in Washington, he's got Sam Howell as his quarterback. If he could turn the Washington offense into an elite success, Bieniemy will have made his bones. So he's got a chance to prove himself now.
Sure.
Another one I want to look at is Bill O'Brien in New England. He's taking over from Matt Patricia, which is just getting rid of Matt Patricia is a huge boon. Bill O'Brien will see whether or not he is helpful in himself or whether or not he just is average. And finally, we have Nathaniel Hackett coming to New York. Look, Aaron Rodgers is the Jets offensive coordinator. Let's not kid ourselves. He's the general manager. He's the coordinator. He's whatever he wants to be. But like, I don't particularly love having Hackett here. Let's go Jets though.
Yep.
For defensive coordinators, there's 4 in particular I'm curious to watch. There's Vance Joseph in Denver. You have the whole new coaching regime there, so that's just an interesting situation. We have Steve Wilkes in San Francisco. With Wilkes, he's got the pressure. He's taking over from D'Amico Ryans, who's, I believe, the head coach in Houston. And so there's some pressure there to keep that defense elite. I mean, there's a shitload of talent there, and I have faith in him. But he's also a defensive backs guy for a team that's kind of built around the front 7. So we'll see how that goes. We have Vic Fangio in Miami. He's famous for his defense, and so will his new scheme work there? New/old scheme. And then finally, we have Brian Flores in Minnesota. Flores has generally been pretty successful. Minnesota was obviously very bad last year, even though they went 13-4. So I'm curious about all 4 of these situations.
Okay. All right. So the next topic here, this is kind of a fun one for me. I like hearing what you think of the widest range of outcomes for this year, whether it be like basically a team that you could see, completely missing the playoffs, maybe being a top 5 or 10 pick, and then or maybe winning their division.
So when you're talking about variance, a lot of it comes down to the quarterbacks.
Sure.
And so you have New York, you have Chicago, you've got Green Bay. All of them have a wide range of outcomes. I would include Denver as well, given that Russell Wilson now has a real coaching staff. We'll see whether or not he still got it. You have situations like Atlanta and New Orleans, where they just have such soft schedules that if they're any good at all, they could catch fire. So that's generally the thing I'll be looking for in terms of variance. But also, you just never know about injuries. It's dark to say, but God forbid Tua goes down, or Lamar Jackson goes down, or Aaron Rodgers goes down. Yeah, that variance is pretty harsh.
Yeah.
Like, what's his name? Allen with Buffalo. He played through a partially torn UCL last year, and he was still able to play. It hurt him, weakened him, but it's one of those situations where if a guy's playing hurt, that is also, you got some downside variance. So
sure.
Injuries are a big thing, but also just if we don't know how good a guy is, that's another big thing. And if the schedule allows for a lot of variance, like the Eagles, they had a ton of variance last year because the schedule turned out to be so incredibly soft. We all knew what their schedule was in advance. None of us really predicted they'd have 14 or 15 wins. So those are the things to look out for, I think.
Okay. All right. So the next one was another one. I think we had touched on this last year. I think it was a Clyde's question about the odds of a team having the lowest amount of the worst record or the first pick or something. I don't remember what it was last year, but it kind of, once I saw Jeffrey Benson's tweet from earlier this year, it was from July actually, so not that far ago, about the teams for most wins and losses, and there's some certain criteria Circa has with tiebreakers, so that you got to keep that in mind too when you're betting it. So that's like another aspect you have to look at if you're going to bet through Circa anyways. But regardless, I know last year when we were discussing this with the worst team, it was kind of a motivation-centric focus when analyzing who you might bet. So like last year, I think it ended up being the Bears with the number 1 pick. I think you had, it was like Houston. I don't remember Seattle, but Seattle obviously surprised some people. But as far as like your analysis from, say, like going from, looking at this market for most losses, how do you look at, like, how would you look at most wins if you were gonna bet this market?
So for most wins, you could just go by the team win totals and say, all right, like Kansas City's the favorite. They've got Mahomes. They should be the favorite.
Sure.
But they also face a tough schedule, and they're missing their best defender right now because of contract issues. So they're going to face some headwinds there. You have other potential teams like Buffalo and Philadelphia. They're also very strong teams. Cincinnati. But one of the things to look at is New Orleans has the softest schedule in the league. They might be good. They have a new coaching staff. They have Derek Carr. Michael Thomas might stay. Am I getting his name right? Or let's check because I'm so bad with names.
You're talking about Michael Thomas, the wide receiver.
Yeah, got it right. Michael Thomas.
Yeah.
They have Chris Olave. So, like, they do have some offensive skill talent if Carr is good. So, yeah, there's some. New Orleans might pull a Philadelphia, play an amazingly soft schedule, put up a ton of wins. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I think they're going to be anywhere near as good as Philadelphia was last year, but they don't have to be.
Sure. They
don't have to be one of the best teams to have one of the best records. And so I believe I checked the current odds are at 22-1. Since I'm looking at the tweet, I can't really tell what they were.
They were
on the page.
They weren't on that page, but it looks like. But I'm guessing they probably moved a little bit, or perhaps. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know, but like at 22-1 for a team that's facing the soft schedule. Like, well, is it likely to them? Obviously not. But at 22-1, it doesn't have to be likely. You just have to have a chance, and they do have a chance.
Yeah. Okay. And I saw that. Yeah. Going back to the tweet from July, I saw that going to the regular season losses, Cardinals went from 3-1 to 2-1. Now I know you were probably going to dive into. I think you were going to talk about like them releasing McCoy, and I'm sure like the tanking aspect is probably making you think that this is probably going to be like, you can realistically make an Arizona versus the field bet almost.
I think that is the fair question. Is it Arizona versus the field? And the field should be favored because it's a 31-1 thing, but Arizona is the clear and dominant favorite, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I did not actually even think of this market at the time when they released McCoy. I looked for all the under 4.5s I could find. And there were some adjusted lines as well. But at that point, I realized they were serious. They wanted to lose, and they're going to try hard to lose. That's the thing. If you have a worst record, you have to make an effort. So last year, Houston made an effort, and they fell just short because they won the final week. Chicago in the back half of the season, they made an effort. They didn't win a game, I think, from at one point onward. So you've got to want it. And Arizona, organizationally, they want it.
Sure.
Now, I know they've got a new head coach, so normally they try to come in and make a good first impression. But in Arizona, that's a complicated thing. So the players are going to try to win every week. That's what players do.
As they should.
As they should. But organizationally, if Josh Dobbs is your starting quarterback week 1, you are not trying to win football games. You're just not.
That's true. And when I saw that question at first, and like we don't really, I guess since we're talking about it now, we don't really necessarily need to address it at the end. But what I was thinking more lines of like, well, McCoy's not really that good, but the drop off from McCoy to Dobbs, okay, I guess I understand why you would view that.
McCoy is not good, but he falls into the acceptable range of backup quarterbacks while you're ostensibly your starting quarterback is rehabbing. Dobbs is an emergency situation you pick up in the season when you've lost multiple quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's
or you start the season as your QB3.
Yeah, that's like Josh Johnson's sort of situation with the Niners. You don't play him until like 3 or 4 guys get hurt. Basically.
Exactly. So yeah, this being Plan A is a sign of serious tanking intent.
Sure. Okay.
And if he wins, Lord knows whether or not they'll switch gears and put in Clayton Tune. who's a rookie 5th-round pick who does not, in my opinion, have an NFL-level arm. And obviously he'll have all the problems the rookies have. But I don't think it's Monday, although I don't know if Arizona has officially released a starting quarterback. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Dobbs.
Yeah, because I think he was. There was the laughing part. I think it was the new Arizona coach that was saying he wanted to maintain a competitive edge by not telling people who his starting quarterback was. But
All right. Good luck with that. I mean,
like
that's your plan. Okay.
Okay. Like, unless you're trading for Mahomes before the game, like, I don't think anyone's really worried about any competitive edge you might have entering that game. So, okay, so we kind of covered that. All right, so let's go into the last part here before we go by team, division by division here. So I know when we entered the draft, the draft, when the draft had happened, Rodgers was not officially part of the Jets, and you were talking about.
No. That's not true.
Oh, was he already traded to them at that point?
Yeah, and we know that he was traded to them because we swapped the 13th and 15th pick.
Oh, okay. Never mind then. Okay, so regardless, months later, as with Rodgers as your quarterback, how have you been processing, your football life or your football fandom with Rodgers as your quarterback?
I mean, I went through the 5 stages of giving up a shitload of draft capital, including what will most likely be our 2024 first-round pick if he plays 65% of the snaps, which certainly is the plan. And so, okay, this is what's happening now. Get on board. And so I've gotten on board. I am rooting for Rodgers. I'll be rooting for the Jets on Monday Night Football. I hope we beat Buffalo. I hope he can recapture his MVP form from a few years ago, or if not, is just good enough to lead them to 10 or more wins, playoff berth. We haven't hosted a home playoff game since I want to say 2002 or 2004. It's been a really long time. So if he accomplishes that, then the trade was certainly worth it, because the Jets made this trade because they had a strong draft last year. They would like to win now, and he gives them perhaps the best opportunity to do so in a world where Lamar Jackson didn't exist. But anyways, so yeah, they made the trade, and I'll be rooting for him. Now, it turned out to screw us in the draft. What happened in the draft, because we had the 15th pick instead of 13th pick, we clearly wanted to add an offensive lineman. And so we, at 15, hoped to get one of the top 4. 3 of them were gone when there was the 14th pick, which was New England. They traded back with Pittsburgh, I believe from 17 to 14. And that enabled Pittsburgh to jump us and grab the last of the top offensive tackles. And then we were kind of lost, and we panicked, and we took an edge who I think was in the 30s on the consensus big board. So the draft did not go well for us, and Rodgers was obviously a part of that. Now, he was not the one who drafted poorly there, but giving up that swap put us in a tough situation. So whatever. The draft pissed me off. The trade pissed me off. All of that pissed me off, but who cares? Let's go Jets.
Yeah, and I mean, they do have the reigning rookie of the years for offense and defense. So, I mean, that's a good.
They do. Yeah, that draft was awesome. And even if they didn't have the offensive rookie of the year and defensive rookie of the year, we also had the backup guy who would have been the offensive rookie of the year had he not gotten hurt, like Breece Hall.
Yeah.
The running back was going to win. So, awesome draft, and I hope Hall is healthy. The fact that we signed Cook for $7 million, which A, I think was just a bad move in its own, but B, it suggests that Hall might not be healthy. So I'm a little concerned about that, but wait and see, I guess.
Sure. Okay. So it looks like this next area here, I think you went team by team a little later in the outline here. So I think the part here in the outline this was kind of how you were viewing the betting market here, team by team, division by division. So I guess kind of go through some of your before the list.
Oh yeah. So in terms of financial interests, I'm loaded for bear on the Eagles futures. On overs on wins, NFC East, NFC, Super Bowl, just all of the above, everything.
Now, do you dabble in? Do you find any like outs for like? Do you do alts? Like, do you do alt bets? Like,
There are alts. There are mainstream books
okay,
that offer alts, and so I have nothing against alts. Like generally, I do have a spreadsheet designed to price alts,
okay,
which takes into account whether what kind of schedule they're facing and what kind of injury risk they might have. There's a lot of variance that goes into alts, and some teams they're like the Jets alts. The Jets will have more variance in the average team, and the alts should take that into account. And at least the alts I saw did, so good for them. But in the case of the Eagles, I viewed them differently than the market viewed them. So every price I was going to look at was going to be good, and it was just a matter of how much could I get down at various prices on various markets.
okay. All right. So you're all in on the Eagles.
I am all in on the Eagles. In terms of other teams that I invested in, I will always have Chiefs futures as long as Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes. They've hosted 5 straight AFC Championship games. They are the team to beat. They just are in the AFC, and that's just how it is. And the market pricing, it does treat them as the favorite, but not as a big enough favorite, which is what gambling is about. And I also have a lot of faith in the 49ers. My internal pricing found a lot of value in them and the futures markets to win the NFC and to win the Super Bowl. So I'm on them as well. In terms of teams I faded, like once the Cardinals released McCoy, it was just a wake-up call to me to take their losing seriously. And so, because I believe incentives matter, I faded them pretty hard. I faded the Rams because that roster, like they have Matthew Stafford and they have Aaron Donald, and if healthy, they have Cooper Kupp. But holy shit, is that roster terrible? Like, if they wanted to, they could like compete in a fair fight with Arizona by trading Donald, saying Kupp is hurt, saying Stafford is out with Jokic, and like, yeah, fair fight, boys. Let's see who could lose.
Sure.
Let's see what else. The Panthers, their roster had some issues even before they traded a ton of draft picks and gave away their top wide receiver, DJ Moore. I expect this to be a tough year for Bryce Young, and also more recently, their star edge rusher, Brian Burns, has been holding in. I think it's called because he's there, but he's not playing because he wants a new contract. So they have a bunch of issues to deal with. I have faded them. Let's see who else. I'm fading Denver. And this, by the way, should be considered no disrespect to Sean Payton. I think he's an awesome coach. I don't love that roster, and I don't have faith in Wilson, because Wilson had been fading even before he got to Denver. And I think it's a tough ask for him to bounce back. And also, the division is tough. You have 2 games against the Chargers. You have 2 games against the Chiefs. It's hard to go 50-50 in those. And if you go like 1-3 or worse, then you're behind the 8 ball in terms of getting to like 9 wins. Yep. Let's see what else. One thing I wanted to mention with the 49ers, I know that roster is loaded. I would really, really, really appreciate if they had Bosa. Sure. For the Chiefs, I would really, really, really appreciate if they had Jones. I know those guys will both come back eventually, but sooner is better. There's a case with the Browns where I looked at that roster, I was like, I have to bet the over on this team. And then I reminded myself, all right, let's watch a little more film of Deshaun Watson. Let's look for the silver linings here. And all I saw were dark clouds. He looks fucking terrible. Just awful.
Now, is this your analysis of watching him last year? Because I honestly...
last year and what I could see from preseason. Okay. And I know I generally don't think preseason matters, but in his particular case, I just wanted a ray of sunshine. I wanted a narrative. I wanted to bullshit myself.
Yeah.
Into believing that he's back. And I couldn't. That's how bad he looked. Like, I wanted to... If you're trying to lie to yourself and you can't, oy vey, something's wrong. And something looks wrong with Watson. And I think the problem is, I talk about incentives a lot. Incentives matter. He is a fully guaranteed contract, which is not the norm for the NFL, particularly in multi-year deals. And so, like, I'm sure he wants to win. I'm sure at practice he tries hard. But like at 5:30 in the morning when other quarterbacks are getting up to go work out or watch film, like he can hit the snooze button. So incentives matter. And I don't know if he's working as hard as his competitors, as his peers, because he doesn't have to. He does not have to. Not financially, anyway.
Sure.
So I do wonder if that's the issue, or look, maybe there's something else going on. Could there be a physical issue? Could it actually still be rust? It could be rust. I'd be surprised if it was still rust, but it could be. So I don't necessarily know what it is, but I have speculation.
Okay.
And so I do not have futures on the over on the Browns, even though I really wanted to. In terms of the Jets, I would fade them. I don't think that they're, well, I do think they're actually pretty good. I don't think they're as good as the market thinks in terms of their season win totals, just because their schedule is really, really tough. And so I would fade them, but emotionally, I can't click. I can't click under on the Jets. It just, it feels bad, man.
So yeah, so like that's your, like as somebody who, you know, bets pretty heavily into these markets, that's your one, like you will say that fandom does influence your thinking on the Jets. Like
it does not influence my thinking, but it will stop me from fading them.
Okay, so you'll bet them if it's like if you have a positive, if your numbers.
Yeah, if I think I have an edge betting on the Jets, nothing like my feelings will not get involved.
Sure.
But if I think I have an edge betting against them, I can do other things with my time and my money.
That's fair. I mean, because even though you're in the business to make money, or when you're betting, you're looking to make money. There are the emotional things that go into it too, that you kind of have to weigh in, that aren't necessarily measurable. That I get that.
And it's the same thing with Syracuse basketball. I will not generally fade them because, again, it feels bad, man. So
yeah, and also they've made some very nice runs in 10 seeds and 11 seeds.
They have. It's now getting a little further in the rear review window. I enjoyed all of them.
It is, yeah. So you'll take that. But all right, so yeah, you're big on Philly and then Kansas City, San Fran. So it sounds like a little bit like last year. It sounds like we're gonna, like, if last year plays out, if this year plays out like last year, you'll probably have a good year.
Yes, I do think that the teams that were good last year are still the teams that are good this year. I don't think there's been a ton of change in terms of who the elites are. But we'll see. I mean, the NFL is full of surprises.
Sure.
It's one of the things we all love about it.
Yep. All right. So listener questions here. There's a few here from Amber Gambling. First one was the ideal age and maturity for a quarterback in 2023 with respect to COVID year and the 2-year learning curve.
So my first thought was, let's go in the completely opposite direction.
Okay.
We've seen older quarterbacks have success in the NFL. Like Rodgers was the back-to-back MVP in his mid to late 30s. Brady won a Super Bowl in his 40s. And in tennis, we've seen guys in their 30s win most of the last 40, 50, 60, whatever it is, Grand Slams. We've seen elite success continued longer. But I don't think that's a general thing. I do think it's just a matter of rare athletes at a particular time. We've seen the same guys who dominated in the 30s dominated in the 20s. Wasn't other guys in the 30s dominated at the time. So in terms of maturity for a quarterback, the first year is usually a learning curve. We've seen a lot of elite quarterbacks struggle in their first years, and some even struggled in their second, Aikman being a famous example. And so in terms of respect to the year 2 learning curve, let's look at this situation with Trevor Lawrence. In his first year, he did not have a real NFL head coach.
Sure.
He had Urban Meyer. And in the second year, he did have a real head coach. He had Peterson, formerly the Eagles. And he was much, much better. And now that can happen. Now, with the Jets, we did not see a huge second-year leap with Zach Wilson, and so now we have Aaron Rodgers. There's a lot of variance with quarterbacks development. You never know who will and who won't. I think the best quarterback season of all time came from second-year quarterback Dan Marino back in '84.
Yeah.
Relative to the record books at the time, and relative to the rest of the league, it's that year still I don't think has been equal.
That's like a complete outlier of everything that happened. At that time.
So in terms of the ideal age of maturity to a quarterback, I don't necessarily know how it can involve COVID in this, but I think 24 to 28 is the sweet spot for quarterbacks. Assuming you come to the league between the ages of 21 and 23, that gives you a year or two to get ready to learn, and then you have your peak physical performance while you're still developing. I think that should generally be the peak. I have not actually done any analysis or research on this, so I might be talking out of my ass.
Okay, fair enough. And like you said, there were just so many old quarterbacks that I have to imagine in the past 5 years that the average age of a starting quarterback has gone down by quite a bit because of all those guys.
Yeah, if we're going by the mean, then Brady retiring changed it a ton.
Yeah.
By median, I doubt it would change that much, but I don't know.
Sure. Okay. All right, so let's go. Next question from her was, how would you identify the potential for more injuries on a team this year? Do you think there are any that seem more prone this year?
So one of the things I would love to see would be an independent study of various field turfs, grass versus the various other options. This is one of those things where the NFL will just lie to us.
Sure.
I have no faith in any NFL research and subject. Like when there were the concussion studies, they did not have concussions listed for Aikman and Young. I don't recall if they didn't have any of them for all, or if they didn't refer to that as the reason why they retired, but I remember it was a big thing at the time that people mocked them for. So the NFL is not a reliable narrator in terms of injuries. So I have not seen any such studies. It's something I'd love to see. I know I am a little leery of certain fields, particularly where the Jets and Giants play. So it's just something I note. Do I have involved in my spreadsheets? I don't. Maybe I should. Maybe I should add a injury modifier. I do have various injury modifiers for players who have had injuries in prior years, but I don't have one for the fields they play on.
Okay.
In terms of other injury risks, like obviously quarterbacks who have had particular injuries who might injure them. Like, I don't know if concussions count in that re-injury theory, but I'm always going to be worried for Tua in that respect. I'm going to be worried for Bryce Young simply because of his size. So that's stuff, though, I think about in terms of other guys that seem more prone. Like the Chargers get wrecked by injuries every single year, and I don't necessarily know if that's the field or the training staff or whatever it is. It is a constant for them. It's something even they have gotten used to. I hope that they buck the trend this year. We'll see. In terms of a single player who's a non-quarterback who I'd love to stay healthy, the Jets 2020 first-round pick, Mekhi Becton, he'll be playing at right tackle this year. He has played in one game over the last 2 seasons, but his rookie year, he was pretty awesome, particularly run blocking. It's a contract year for him. We declined his 5th-year option. I'd really like to see him stay healthy and dominant and get paid and have the Jets win. Good luck, man.
Yes, sir. All right, her next thing here was about book suggestions, and I'm pretty sure she meant actual reading books, not sports books. So I think you went with that.
I certainly hope so, because that's how I took questions, how I answered it.
So just go with that.
So in terms of science fiction, there's a 2-book series called Ilium and Olympos by Dan Simmons. That's going to be my number 1 recommendation there. For mysteries, there's 2 that I really love. The Lock Artist by Steve Hamilton and 5 Decembers by James Kestrel. One note on 5 Decembers, not for the squeamish or faint of heart. There are some murders in it that are pretty grisly. In terms of thrillers, Ice Station by Matthew Riley. Please note, do not expect any realism from Matthew Riley. It's just a ride. In terms of fantasy, my favorite series is by Stephen Bruce, and the first book in it is called Jereg. It is also known as the Vladimir Taltos series. In terms of one book, I don't want to tell too much about it. I'm going to leave this unclassified. The Chess Garden by Brooks Hansen.
Okay.
The full name is a really long name, like The Chess Garden or The Letters by Gustav Ostrovsson or whatever his name is. But you can find The Chess Garden by Brooks Hansen.
Okay.
In terms of a fantasy / mystery, The Rook by Daniel O'Malley. I also want to add one pirate fantasy. Now, this is the first book in what is planned to be a 3-book series. So I understand if you've been burned before and you don't want to read the first book in the series until it's completed. I totally understand. But The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty, that I would recommend. But the one that I am most excited for, and this has been written, we're just waiting for it to be translated fully into English. Book 1 is out in English. The series is called Red Queen, Black Wolf, and White King, and it's by Juan Gomez Jurado. So Red Queen is already out. You can go check it out. Black Wolf is going to be out in March 2024. We do not yet. I don't think we have a date yet for White King. Again, you remember how I mentioned 5 December is not for the faint of heart? This series is very, 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 very much not for the faint of heart. Okay. But really, really good. For if you're interested in Japanese light novels, my number 1 is Baccano, which is Baccano, then an apostrophe because the Japanese love putting punctuation in their names, and that is by Ryuhogo Narita. In terms of manga, Monster by Naoki Urasawa, or Arpeggio of Blue Steel by Art Performance. And by the way, if the name doesn't give it away, Monster again, not faint of heart. For Western graphic novels, East of West by Jonathan Hickman. This is a post-apocalyptic novel. So, again, faint of heart, blah, blah, blah. But again, I really like it. So these are my recommendations.
So, yeah, when it comes to books, like how many books would you say you read in a given month or a given year? I don't know
given month, about 2. So given year, I'm going to shoot for more than 20.
Okay.
I don't get a lot of reading done in December, but otherwise I do try to read. Reading is fun. I actually made an active effort to rebuild my attention span.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll turn off my cell phone, I'll close my computer, I'll make myself a cup of tea, and I'll just sit and read at night. Okay. Like I used to do when I was a kid.
Okay. And you got a good spot for that in your at your place?
Yeah, I have a couple good spots for that.
Okay.
So yeah, it's something that, like, I know it's hard to find time to read, but I do highly recommend it. Like, you remember the Scholastic book fairs when we were kids?
Yeah.
Remember how awesome they were?
Yeah.
Reading is great. You know what else is great? Libraries.
Yeah, and I have a library that's like right, really close to me, and it's like I never even think about stepping in there for some reason.
Step in there. But you know what? Make time for it. Like, say, I'm going to spend the next hour in this library just walking around looking at books. It's like a bookstore, but it's free.
Yeah, and I think too, one thing that I've learned a lot about myself in the past 3 or 4 months with this working out stuff, we'll get into that in a minute, but is that like you could always make excuses saying that you don't have enough time to do something, but even if you got a book and you read 10 pages a day on it, you'd still get 300 pages done in a month, which is which could be a book depending on the length of the book. So you just have to make time for certain things if you really want to do something. So
exactly right.
So that's like one thing that I've learned is that like you can make a lot of excuses about not having time to do something, but if you just carve out a little bit of time per day instead of making it this big worry in your head like, oh, I don't have time to finish a 500-page book. Well, just read 20 pages a day then, or 15 pages a day. You'll be done with it in a month. So I know.
Exactly right. I support this message 100%.
So like again, I haven't read like I tend to read only when I'm on airplanes for whatever reason. I don't have a good reason for that. Airplanes like when I most of my flights are out west when I fly. It's usually like my last few flights are Vegas or San Diego where I have like 4 hours on a plane. So that's when I tend to do like my reading if I'm going to read. So I don't really read that many books, but I just wanted to add that aside. Like it is something that I would like to. I think that's maybe more of a long-term goal. Not saying this year, but I would like to get more into reading different things in the future. So I do appreciate the question there from Amber there and the recommendation. So yeah, well let's get back into the football aspect of things. So the next one here was from USA NYG was about. He had a couple questions here. First one was about just Giants Jets thoughts. Always fun. I'm curious about where you stand on a few interesting quarterbacks like Lawrence, Dak, Hurts, Jones, Lamar, and where they fit in the hierarchy and how much has changed in the past 12 months. And then also your thoughts on Deshaun looking weirdly awful and expectations for him.
All right. I'll just go in the order that they mentioned them. So let's start with Lawrence. Like Lawrence, the future is bright. Like he's only had 1 year with a real coach, so he should be even better this year. This could be considered like his second year leap, with last year being his rookie season. If we want to do that, just give him a full mulligan for year zero, as it were. I think Lawrence is going to be great, and I'm still very, very mad that Jacksonville out-tanked us for him. Next up is Dak. So Dak, like, he gets dinged for not having a ton of playoff success, but I don't know how healthy he's been in some of those playoff games. I think if Dak can stay healthy this year, this is a very strong roster. I know they've got a tough division rival with Philadelphia, but the Cowboys are a good football team. Like, they are a legitimate threat. Their last 2 years, they've lost to the 49ers in the playoffs. They've gone 12-5 each year. They are a serious team. I wouldn't even consider them dark horse. They are like the second-tier favorites in the NFC, or right, third team, probably third most likely team in the NFC to win the Super Bowl. They're a good football team, and Dak is a huge part of that. Like, if they don't have Dak, well, Trey Lance better be that dude. Nice trade, boys.
Yeah, and wouldn't that be something if that came back to bite the Niners somehow?
If Trey Lance beats the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, we will never hear the end of it. Never, ever.
I don't want to think about it.
I totally understand. Like, ESPN would be talking about it all week heading into the game and all week after the game. Like, they'll talk about the Super Bowl too, obviously, but like, holy shit. That would be a story. Then Hurts, Hurts has just he has relentlessly improved his play. He's gotten smarter. He's making better decisions. He played really well last year. And I didn't like this. There was this weird tweet I saw a few weeks ago talking about unluckiest quarterbacks, and Hurts was the unluckiest of them all. And I was like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But the logic behind it was he was victimized by wide receiver fumbles, which I suppose is a thing that can happen. And it's also the kind of thing that's probably not predictive. So it's more likely that will not happen to him this year. So he might put up better numbers simply from regression to the mean in that respect. I think Hurts is really good. I will say that last year he played a very, very soft schedule. This year it's going to be tougher. So we'll see if he can put up the same level of success in that respect. In terms of Daniel Jones, it was nice that he had a real coach last year. Like, we've talked about coaching matters. Not having an NFL level head coach puts you in a tough spot. He had a real one. He played much better. Were the Giants a good team last year? No, they were still not an actual good team. They did make the playoffs, and they won a playoff game against a terrible team that went 13-4, which blows my mind. But I would not have paid Daniel Jones this offseason. He was effectively like a 2-year deal with $81 million with 2 team options for like $31 and then $46 million. I would not have given him that contract, but ownership probably wanted to keep the gang together. ownership is the one writing checks, so they kept the gang together. They used the franchise tag on Saquon Barkley, and then they eventually came to a deal. So he's gruntled, and obviously Jones is happy.
As Michael Scott would say, they're extremely gruntled.
They're extremely gruntled. Like they're gruntled as fuck. So good for them. And they're going to try and run it back and make it back to the playoffs. I do not expect them to succeed, but I'll be hoping that they do. I'll be rooting for them.
Sure.
In terms of Lamar, I actually owe Baltimore an apology. So here I wrote, he doesn't have elite talents around him, but they have made a good faith effort at giving him a solid roster. They let's see. So they signed OBJ, and obviously OBJ, we don't know how much OBJ is the tank, but he might be able to recapture some of his former glory. And they have Rashad Bateman, 2021 first round pick, and they took Zay Flowers in the first round this year.
Yeah.
Another potentially strong wide receiver. So you know what? They're trying. They're making an effort to give him a real wide receiver corps. And in my earlier comments, I wasn't necessarily a fan.
Yeah, and also, like, you know, he has one of the better tight ends too, with Andrews, so that helps.
Yeah,
too.
so like they have given him a real receiver corps, and I spoke otherwise, and that's on me. So
yeah, and supposedly a new offensive system, I guess. So, if I remember right, I don't know if I'm remembering that right, but
what are we talking about?
The Lamar, the
What
Ravens.
about?
No, I'm just saying, like, that's another aspect too, where I think it's supposed to be more pass focused.
They're going to try and build up more of the passing game. So, and you know what? Given the upgraded talent around him, they've got a shot. They could.
Yeah, I've seen some people throwing out Lamar like MVP bets. I mean, that's definitely not the worst.
I mean, it depends on the odds. Would he be my first choice? No, it'll always be Mahomes.
Yeah, I think it was like, I know. I think I've seen anywhere from like 12 to 15 to 1 or something like that. So I mean, that's not the worst odds.
I've never tried to price such a thing. My guess is that Mahomes is always going to be a decent value, unless he's just incredibly short odds. But I don't know. I have no clue. Also, this is one of those things that people vote on. So even if Mahomes is the best, he might not win.
Yeah,
so there's a reason I'm talking these markets.
Yeah. So, all right, then you already mentioned the Deshaun stuff from that part of the question about getting paid.
Like he's right though. He has looked weirdly awful. His expectations are still high. I mean, they gave him a huge contract for a reason. He was really, really good in Houston back in 2020, but 2020 is a long time ago. So I don't know if he's still that dude.
Okay. The next one here, NFL Pinnacle Beat, was asking about what's going on with the Jets and Huff. They had him out there with depth players mostly. He wasn't even on the ESPN depth chart. I think that was a couple weeks ago.
So the story there was, this was in the preseason. It was in the second half, might even be in the fourth quarter. I don't know. But he was out there with the third stringers and the guys who eventually put onto the practice squad. And one of the things that I pointed out and mentioned was the Jets had a variety of injuries among their edge rushers, and a lot of guys that were at least a little dinged up. They didn't want to get further hurt. And so they had to put someone out there. He just happened to be the guy. I didn't want to read too much into it, him being out there. One of the things is they gave him a new contract this offseason for, I want to say, $4 to $4.5 million, whatever it was. But that's real money for a guy who was an undrafted free agent back in 2020. He had 2 sacks his rookie year, another 2 the year after that, and I think 3.5 last year. And he is just increasingly seen an expanded role and can see even more snaps this season. He's a guy who has kind of built himself up from nothing to be a relevant player. So that is my take on Bryce Huff.
Okay. All right, and I'm going to butcher this name because I love butchering names here, but This was from Rick, a.k.a. Chatham3. Any takes on Iosivas?
So I assume it's Greek, but I'm not going to take a stab at it. He's a great athlete. He went to Princeton, and so he's going to take some time to adjust from Ivy League competition to the large athletic gentleman he'll be playing sports ball or football against. So this might take a little time. I will say that I like him as a return prospect right now. It's the kind of thing where you don't necessarily need to learn to run routes. You don't have to get your timing done with your quarterbacks. So, like, yeah, I think he could produce early in the season. I don't expect that he's going to be out there.
Sure. But yeah, and I mean, and if he's out there often, that means that things happen to Chase or Boyd or Higgins, that probably
Yeah, someone's going to be out there.
Yeah. So okay, so this was a series of like first place, last place, more or less likely to happen questions from Food Snob Frog, who participates quite a bit in that meatloaf thread that we're on together, I believe. So we'll just kind of run through these ones that he had here. So last place in NFC West, Rams or Cardinals?
I mean, the Rams would have to make a couple moves. They'd have to de-Staffordize and de-Aaron Donaldize in order for this to be a fair fight. Because right now the Cards are given max effort here, and the Rams just simply aren't. The Rams look like a bad team with a terrible roster. That's the kind of thing that can get you 5-6 wins, whereas the Cards are looking to try and do 3 wins or fewer. They want it more.
Okay. All right. First place in the AFC North, Bengals or Ravens?
I mean, I'm going with the Bengals on this one. Okay. But again, when I wrote this answer, when I was writing my notes on this outline, I was unfair to Baltimore and the receiver corps. I think this is actually a closer competition than I realized at the time. I would still go with the Bengals, but I think it's a fair question.
Okay.
The Ravens do have a chance of A, winning the AFC North, and B, getting like home field advantage, stealing it back. Like they had home field advantage once during the Mahomes era. They just lost in the divisional round. So like, they do have an improved roster. They have a shot. I'd still go with Bengals though.
Okay. First place in the NFC North, Packers or Bears?
So this is one of those things where neither ones are the actual favorites, but it's not necessarily relevant to the question. It's simply which is more likely between the two. I think between the two, it's the Packers. But there's a lot of variance for both teams. There's no dominant team in the division. Like the favorite is the Lions, and they're still the Lions. Like the Packers might get a tiny edge, but I'd sort of coin flip between the Packers and Bears. Having said all that, I will answer the fucking question. I'm going to go with Chicago because I have faith in Justin Fields.
All right. The Bears fans will be happy to hear that. And also, I was going to say before, they'll be happy to hear if you're right about the Panthers, if fading the Panthers, because that'll mean
Sure.
a nice pick there next year. So, yeah. All right. So last one was last place in the AFC South, Texans or Titans.
This one isn't close. It's the Texans. Like I get it. The Titans have gotten old, ossified. Like their quarterback Tannehill has gotten old. Their running back Derrick Henry has a shitload of wear and tear on the tires. So like I understand the question, but the Texans are still the Texans. Like they're starting a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, and you already answered his question about Colt McCoy being released, so we don't need to get into that.
I'd like to though, because is it a tanking move or a strategic move? And the answer is yes.
So it's both. It's tanking and strategic.
The strategy is to tank.
Yes. So yes, it is one of the same. Okay, one and the same. So all right. So the rest of the outline here before we get to that random question at the end is just kind of snippets about each team. So you want to just read through these?
Yeah. So with Buffalo, the one thing I felt like they needed to address was to get a Robin for their Batman in terms of Stephon Diggs. They have an elite number 1 wide receiver, and they really could have used the second one. In the draft, right before they were going to pick, there was the run on the top 4 wide receivers. No tight end had come off the board, so they ended up taking the first tight end in the draft. So, like, I get what they're doing. They know they need additional weapons for Josh Allen, and they did the best they could. But it's one of those things where I feel like they might have wanted to be more aggressive either in the draft or in free agency. But it is what it is. They have a strong roster. They've been a very good team in the last 3 years. I wish them best of luck. In terms of, one thing. Good wide receivers have become tougher to find in the last couple of years. As I said in the wire, the price of the brick has gone up. And for Miami, the big question is Tua. Can like stay healthy? Head injuries are rough in that respect. So he considered retirement this offseason, which is always scary when you're talking about a young quarterback.
Sure.
Like if your 35-year-old quarterback is thinking about retirement, that comes with the territory. If your quarterback still ostensibly on his rookie contract is thinking about retirement, that's a problem. They've added Vic Fangio, so the defense will be fun to watch. That'll be interesting. Changes there. They did not actually have a first-round pick, not because of a trade, but because it was forfeited because their ownership tampered with Tom Brady and did some other stuff. That is just hilarious. That's awful. Had they had their first-round pick, they could have drafted one of the early wide receivers. So they could have gotten a third amigo for Tyreek Hill and Waddle. Or they could have grabbed a blue chipper elsewhere on the roster for a team trying to win now. So, yeah, sucks to be Miami in that respect. For New England, just losing Matt Patricia pays huge dividends, just right off the top. Like Patricia, his presence as the defensive coordinator, he was the offensive coordinator for New England last year. He was the defensive coordinator for the full Super Bowl. So he almost makes that Super Bowl make some sense. Their defense was excellent last year, and that should still be strong this year. The division is really tough. Like the AFC East and the AFC North are both tough divisions. So that's something that Tom Brady never had to deal with, like a tough AFC East. So,
he basically bailed on that division as soon as Buffalo started showing signs of being good.
Like I'd laugh, but he won a Super Bowl in the immediate year after.
He did.
So,
it worked out perfectly.
Yeah. So for Baltimore, like my commentary again is unfair. I'm not sure Bateman OBJ gets it done. And yeah, I am not sure it gets done, but they also added like Zay Flowers. So they added a third blue chip wide receiver. So unfair on my part, party foul Seth. They do have pass rush issues. They have offensive line issues. But the passing game should be upgraded. Getting Jackson back really helps. They're a tough team. Cincinnati, Burrow is just getting better on a year-to-year basis. One of the things I noticed, like he makes better decisions on average year over year. He's got great wide receivers with Chase and Higgins. They were tough last season. Like late in the season, they could have beaten Kansas City. They lost, but that was a really close game. They crushed Buffalo in Buffalo. The defense, one of those defenses where they don't necessarily have the same talent as some of the other good defenses, but they're smart, they play well, they're coached well, and they upgraded in the draft. So they are legitimate contenders in a brutal conference. The Browns, coming here, Watson looks like shit. That's what I have to say. He looks terrible. Last year, we had the excuse of being rusty. You can't run that excuse back. So the team is built to win now. It's a loaded roster. Watson might let him down. The Steelers, the defense could be a lot better with TJ Watt healthy. The offense can improve if Pickett makes a second-year leap. He looked really good this preseason. I don't want to talk too much about preseason. I don't believe too much in preseason, but he looks good. Also, week one, they might get the 49ers without Bosa. So they could be a sneaky team. Texans are just a dumb franchise, like we talked about them in the draft, and they've just done made a lot of bad decisions over the years. So I expect them to get what they deserve and have another terrible year. And Arizona has their first round pick, so good for Arizona. I will be rooting for Stroud, though. For the Colts, you have one job: develop Anthony Richardson. Like he is the unicorn. He is the player who's stealing Sistine Chapel. Like nothing else matters for them. Focus. For the Jaguars, they're the cream of the division. Make the most of it, boys. They have a real quarterback and a real coach. Soft vision. They should host a home playoff game, which gives them a chance to get to the divisional round, and they have some hope, which is nice. The Titans have just gotten old. Like Vrabel is a good coach. I'll have them trying hard on a week-to-week basis. I'm sure they're going to do their best, but they faded. because that's what age does. The Denver Broncos, they have a real head coach now. Huge boost. So there's a really good shot that I'm underrating them. Because going from a bad coach to a good coach, the differences could be enormous. Like, see what the Giants did last year. So the question for them is Wilson washed or not? I am betting on washed. Maybe not. We'll see. For the Kansas City Chiefs, so there was a Twitter poll earlier this year. I think it was from NFL Pinnacle Beat, of whether or not their most important player is Chris Jones or Travis. Sorry, their most important non-quarterback was Chris Jones or Travis Kelce. And for me, I don't think it's particularly close. I understand the question because Kelce gives them a lot, but I think the answer is just clearly Jones. And so I do understand why they're playing hardball with him, because he's under contract for a year and he's trying to reset the market, and there's no easy answer when you're in that situation. But I do view him as their most important non-quarterback. Like he's got a record saying he'll be back week 8. Apparently, sometime in the last 24 hours, like perhaps even when we were on the phone, he had some tweet where like Pinnacle took their futures off the board, or the divisional futures off the board, and apparently the week 1 line moved. So like whatever he said, it must have been like, yeah, I'm not going to be around. I don't know what the tweet is, but it wasn't good for the Chiefs. On the plus side, they faced the Jets early in the season, I think October 1st, or like that week. So if he's not out for that week, I'll be happy. Like, so take your time, Mr. Jones.
And if there's anything that anyone who watches football knows, it's a lot of times it's not like who you play, but when you play them. So yeah, that could work out for you.
So like the Dolphins are playing the Chargers week 1. Those are both teams that you like to get later in the season at home, preferably.
Sure.
And it's a week 1 matchup, so that should be a great game. I'm looking forward to it. For the Raiders, just one question: how healthy is Jimmy Garoppolo's foot? They could be a good team, like if Garoppolo's healthy. Obviously, Garoppolo coming does not bring Shanahan and does not bring the 49ers skill talent. He's put up amazing numbers, been amazingly efficient, but he was put in a great position to succeed. It'll be tougher without the players he was with. I don't know. We'll see. Injuries are not really my beat. For the Chargers, more about injuries. They just get wrecked by injuries every single year. But if healthy, they are a scary team. They are the divisional rivals that could threaten the Chiefs. They do get a game that might be Chris Jones-less. So that put the Chiefs in a tough spot. We'll see. I do, by the way, consider Justin Herbert. First of all, I owe him an apology. He's not a midget. He's not 6'1" like I thought he was when I misread that spreadsheet in that discussion for the draft when we had that, whenever that was. You are tall, much respect, and you are a really, really good quarterback, and you got paid for a reason. So they are a legitimate threat for the Chiefs. The Dallas Cowboys, I do think McCarthy dooms them. I think he's a terrible head coach, and now that he's also has some offensive coordinator responsibilities, I think just allows him to do more damage, more mischief. I think it's just a matter of time. It's a strong roster, and I still have faith in Dak. But one of the reasons why I'm so heavy on the Eagles is I think their big rival is just poorly coached. For the Giants, I wasn't particularly happy when they paid Jones and Barkley, but I do understand it. I don't think it's a good decision long term. But plus side long term, they have good coaching. So that should play dividends in the long run. For the Eagles, it's obviously Super Bowl or bust. If not getting back to the Super Bowl will be a disappointing season for them. I don't think last year was a fluke. I do think they played the easiest schedule possible to get to the Super Bowl, like the regular season, obviously we know about, but then they faced the Giants at home in the playoffs, and then faced the 49ers without a quarterback at home in the playoffs. It could not have been a softer path. Having said that, they had an awesome draft. I think they're going to still be monsters again this year. The Commanders, so they have the new coaching regime. They have Eric Bieniemy as the new offensive coordinator. I'm very excited for Sam Howell. I thought he was one of those quarterbacks who had some hope coming to the NFL, so I'd like to see him succeed. there's a lot of upside here if he's pretty good. Also, they did not pick up the 5th-year extension on, I think his name is Chris Young, Chase Young,
Yeah.
Chase Young. The number 2 overall pick in that draft. He had a great rookie season, then been just injured since then. He's in a contract year, so him, like Becton, hopefully he can stay healthy and have an awesome season. I'm rooting for him in particular. For the Chicago Bears, I despise all those ELO graphs that we see with Fields, like pointing that quarterbacks in his situation just do not have a good track record of succeeding in the NFL. And that's true, but context matters. He has just not been given a fair chance to succeed given what the Bears have put around him. They were kind of tanking last year. They kind of built a roster to fail, and they ended up succeeding. But it worked out for Fields because now he himself has done, like last year, he got an MVP vote. He was like Offensive Player of the Week or NFC Player of the Week 1 week. And he got the first overall pick, which enabled them to start building around him. So great trifecta on his part. I'll be rooting for Chicago. I'll be rooting for Fields in particular. But now that he has a chance, now that he actually has some improved talent around him, like DJ Moore and stuff, it is put up or shut up.
Yeah, and I will say that I like when that draft, and this isn't like revisionist, but when the draft was going on a couple of years ago, I was kind of wanting, I did kind of want Fields with the Niners pick. I know that that's not what happened, but so in that case too, I do want to see Fields, do well.
Sure, I viewed Fields as one of the guys that would be like 1 or 1A between him and Trey Lance. Trey Lance was kind of an unknown from North Dakota State, but there was a lot of great traits that he could have offered. Which literally the Fields had the track record of success at Ohio State. Now, obviously, Ohio State, you're playing with great talent. You have that talent advantage over your opponents, so that boosts your statistics, particularly with his wide receivers. I still liked him a ton, though. So, yeah, I was in the same boat as you were in. The Detroit Lions, the offense was great last year. The defense was not. The defense was pretty terrible. Also, one thing that I don't know people have talked about a lot, but they got hosed indirectly by the refs in the Seahawks-Rams game where the Rams. So what happened there is a Seahawks victory would eliminate the Lions from the playoffs, and the late night game was going to be Green Bay versus Detroit. And I think the league was very excited for having Aaron Rodgers back in the playoffs. Now, this is conspiracy Seth talk, I understand. But that game, there's a lot of discussion about it. It was not a well-officiated game, and all the calls that were controversial went against the Rams, and they ended up winning because of it. But then the Lions ended up winning on Sunday Night Football anyway, so good for them. I would like to see them return to the playoffs this year. It's been a long time since they've had playoff success. I'd like to see them succeed. For the Green Bay Packers, time for love. Dr. Jones. Yep. I'm ready for them.
Yeah.
What were we saying?
No, I was say that this particular division, and I know you're going to get into Minnesota here in a second, but
yeah,
this particular division has it just in my head. I don't do I don't do any analysis compared to you, but just thinking about this to me seems like the most wide open division to me. I know that there's a couple others, but.
I think you can make a case for the NFC South as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a wide open division.
Yeah.
And then we have the Minnesota Vikings. They went 13-4 last year. They were outscored by 3 points. So that alone makes it hard to go 13-4. And then they were the 27th best team in the NFL, according to DVOA. So they were a terrible team that somehow, despite being terrible, were only outscored by 3. And despite being outscored by 3, they went 13-4.
Yeah, you play the winning game, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff by the Vikings. Yeah. I don't know how they did. And I watched every game they played last year, and I saw them go 13-4. Obviously, the Buffalo game, they had some amazing stuff. They had the great catch. They had the fumble when Buffalo was trying to run the clock. So, they had some great stuff in their favor, some weird stuff in their favor, but you can't just – I don't know how they got to 13-4. For the Falcons, so the two softest schedules in the NFL this year, the Falcons face the second softest, and the Saints face the softest, and it's almost a statistical tie between them. Like they've loaded up on skill talent. They've got Pitts, they've got Robinson, they have the wide receiver London. Like they have some really good players. If I don't have a lot of faith in Ritter, but if he is good, or if he's like even just acceptable, like he can lead them to the promised land. They can make the playoffs if they're just a mediocre team. Like if they're a 500 team in terms of just how good they are, like an average NFL team, they should make the playoffs. The Carolina Panthers, they've got a small quarterback with big dreams. I think they've got a weak roster. They do have a soft-ish schedule, not quite as soft as the Falcons and Saints. I don't think that'll be enough. I think they're going to have a lot of problems this year. The Saints, again, it's been a soft schedule in the league. They have Derek Carr. I think he is a legitimate chance. They have a new coaching regime. That could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. I don't know. Also, one thing in particular about the Saints is they are salary cap wizards. They have this situation where if you look back, not even next year, I think I don't remember which, if they have $6 million in projected salary cap space in 2025, or if they're $6 million over the cap in 2025. It's one of those two. But like they are unique in how aggressive they are in doing cap magic / wizardry. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like here's the check for Baker Mayfield. Are you washed or not? He played hurt for the Browns. He gave them everything he had, and he was punished for it. He paid the price. So like, he's one of those guys where I'd like to see succeed, simply because he left it all on the field. And they do have some potentially good receivers. Like this is a team that won the Super Bowl just a few years ago. So maybe we'll see. But they're also one of those teams that are potentially in the running for the first overall pick in the draft. So wide range of outcomes ish, if Mayfield can get it back.
Sure.
For the Cardinals, look, they are tanking. There's no uncertainty about their plan. They made a commitment to the tank, and they're my choice to get first overall pick in the draft. Like obviously they should be underdogs against the field, but like at the price I saw, like 2-1 was the circuit price. I'm not going to be bet. I will not actually bet this, but that is the bet I would make if I were to make a bet on tanking.
Sure.
On the same way, if I was to make a bet on to have best overall record at 22-1, I would take the Saints, even though I don't think it'll be them. At 22-1, I think they're the best price.
Okay.
So with the Rams, they are potential tank prospects, but again, they still have Stafford, so they still have a real quarterback, and they have an elite defensive tackle with Aaron Donald. But otherwise, this has been a gutted roster.
Yeah.
Part of the salary cap, like part of it is just why not?
Yeah, and they haven't had a first round pick in forever.
They apparently have a first round pick next year. So like that's the pick watch. Do they keep it or do they trade it?
Yeah.
Will they or won't they?
Yeah. All right.
Then we come to your team, the 49ers. So this roster is loaded. They've defense, tons of skill talent. They've got a great coach. They've got Mr. Irrelevant at their quarterback, so let's ride. Also, Sam Darnold getting a ring would be hilarious to me. In particular, like if he were to do who was the quarterback on the New England on the Patriots who won the AFC Championship game for them against the Steelers before Tom Brady won any rings? Like Brady coached the Super Bowl. Played in the Super Bowl against the Rams, but was that Drew Bledsoe?
It was Bledsoe's the only one that comes to mind.
I would love Sam Darnold to get like an NFC Championship game. He won like even a divisional round game. He won a key playoff game for them. Then Purdy came back and won the Super Bowl for them. That would be hilarious to me. I'd love to see Sam Darnold contribute to a championship.
Yeah.
And then we come finally to the Seattle Seahawks. So here's the question. Like, early in the season, Geno Smith started like a house of fire. He gave that great quote, like, they write me off, I didn't write back. But later in the season, that offense kind of collapsed. And so, is he who we thought he was? They were down bad down the stretch. Like, I'll be watching. Does he turn back into a pumpkin? I don't think he will, but it's something like there's some pumpkin downside risk. That I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and they got the 4 division games against the Cardinals and the Rams, so that should help a little bit.
It does. That having four games in your division that should all reasonably wins. That's like, it's the opposite of being behind the 8 ball. You're starting off in a great spot.
Yeah, if you look at the math behind it, maybe you're talking 3-1. I don't know.
Yeah. So let's just say you go like 6-7 in the other games.
Yeah.
That gets you like a 9 or 10 wins, and that's
realistic side at a playoff spot. Yep. So, all right. So we just discussed all the football. One thing I wanted to end with, because one thing I have been posting about occasionally and that I've gotten into in the last, I think it was like 4 months ago, I started like a walking program with work. When I say a program, it was just myself, like on lunch breaks. Instead of, I would eat my lunch when I was working first shift, I would eat my lunch ahead of time, and then I would take a walk around the area where I worked at, and I would walk a couple laps, and ended up being like 1.4 miles. And I just kind of started noticing the effects of how everything was going with that. So I just kept going with it. And I was like, well, this is how easy it could have been the whole time for me if I just made the time and the effort to put into getting in a better shape. So what I wanted to ask you to end this is like a wellness discussion in terms of, like, as you've gotten older, how have you adjusted your diet, your exercise, and other areas of wellness as you've gotten older? Because I know that, like, I've gone through shifts in my life where, like, the last time I really worked out, this intensely was probably like 7 years ago. And then before that was 3 years prior. Before that was probably like 3 or 4 years prior. So, like, I go through these spurts, but I'm hoping to make it more of a long-term, like, habit. So, like, I guess, what I wanted to discuss at the end here was, as you've gotten older, what are some things you've done with your diet, your exercise, and other areas of wellness that you've found to work for you or not work for you?
Before I get into that, I just want to say how proud I am of you, of all the things you've done with your diet, with your exercising, with you being more responsible in terms of alcohol. Like, you've clearly put in a lot of effort to self-improvement, and I just want to say I have a lot of respect for you for that, and I'm very proud of you for that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Now, in terms of what I've done myself, so you mentioned diet. Years ago, actually, I hadn't thought about this in a long time. I went to a nutritionist. There's a history of diabetes in my family.
Okay.
And it's not something you tell by looking at me or looking at my brothers. And possibly that's the reason why you couldn't tell by looking at me or my brothers. All of us have been very careful to certainly not keep extra weight that we don't need, to be in reasonably good shape and eat decent diets. But I went to a professional and see what she would recommend. And one of the things that she focused on is trying to create a regular meal plan you feel you could stick to, that most of your meals are going to be like plus meals, good healthy meals. What's the stuff that you could eat, not get sick of, not get bored of, that'll be good for you on a regular basis? And the two big winners for me was lentil soup.
Okay.
And there's a lot of variety. I mean, making any kind of soup, you could do a lot of stuff with it. So I do. And so lentil soup was one of the big winners. And the other huge winner was fish over salad. So it's actually what I'm going to be having for lunch today. I'm going to have a tuna and arugula salad. And that's one of those things where it became my protein of choice. And just have a lot of greens, a lot of lean protein. And that was the thing I focused on, trying to find meals that I would be willing to make at home and be able to make at home, and see willing to eat
Okay.
on a regular basis.
That makes sense.
That's what I did.
That makes sense.
And that's one of those things where I thought was good advice from that nutritionist. Like, it's not just making a plan; it's making a plan that you can and will stick to.
Yeah.
And that requires some trial and error, but the trial and error is fun. So, the other thing was, I used to regularly go to the gym. Now, post COVID, I'm actually pretty cautious about COVID. So I have a rowing machine and I bought an exercise bike.
Okay.
I bought that bike actually recently. I had to take it apart to get it into my car. I was buying it used. And now I'm looking at it and it's looking back at me saying, you think you put me back together? And I do think I can put it back together, but I haven't actually done it yet since I'm so busy getting ready for football season. So that's actually probably what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Okay.
But yeah, having access to exercising either a gym membership could work for you, or an exercise machine at home to you, or a home gym could work for you. But just something where you have easy access to it. The fewer barriers between you and your exercising, the better. So that's the other thing I would say focusing on.
Yes. Yeah.
And also there's the general thing of just staying active. Like, even a little thing, even just taking a walk can build. Just if you make anything, you can make a habit like that is good.
Sure. And so my work schedule is going to become more consistent starting next week. I'm going to be full-time first shift starting next week. So I'm going to be on a normal Monday through Friday schedule, like all the other like other people tend to be. And I should hopefully have more routines built into my day-to-day, week-to-week sort of life. So I think that'll help. And the fact that at my office, I still have the option on my lunches to take that walk that I've, and it's like, now it's like I've made it like a 2.1 mile walk each lunch. It takes about like 35 minutes.
That is great. I'm so glad to hear this.
So yeah, so it's things like that I know that I'm trying not to think of like the next time I have like a regression, because I know that all the other times that I've given up exercise in my lifetime, I had some like major life event happen. I think in like 7 years ago, something with my wife. The previous to that, like the 2013, it was like losing my job, stuff like that, where like I just got out of my rhythm and element, and like never got back to like focusing on myself. I was more worried about, finding a job or like my wife or whatever the issue was, whatever the big thing was at the time. So I'm just hoping that that whatever I do, like it's like I have it more, ironed out. And like, even if I do have like a big stressor hit me, that I can hopefully get around that and, stay focused on what I need to do. So yeah, I'm down, I think I'm down like 30 pounds since June, towards the end of June, and probably unofficially probably like closer to 40.
I'll tell you, if I were to lose 30, 40 pounds, I'd be dead.
Yeah, I really needed to though. I was pushing like 260, 265. So now I'm down to 220, like 222, 225 range right now. So
do you have a target weight?
So that's what I'm at right now. But my target weight is probably eventually to get under 200. But that's kind of a long-term goal, because I'm kind of short. I'm only like 5'7". So so I do want to like, but again, I might consider like, all right, well, maybe I want to add weights to my workout. I don't know. There's still things that I have to look into. I don't have any weights at home, so if that was going to happen, it would be at gym probably. But there's other things I have to consider as I take these next steps in my journey. But I kind of wanted to trim some of the weight before I kind of went in those next phases. So
two quick things before we close. I know you wanted to close at around 3 o'clock and still to right now. So
yep.
Two quick things. One, you mentioned weights. Weights and like home gym stuff are one of those things. Craigslist or whatever else, any type of local group, people get rid of that stuff all the time and just like remove it from my house prices.
Sure.
So
that's a good point.
That's the kind of thing you might want to look on like Craigslist or whatever else for, and you might be able to find a decent home gym at a reasonable price, or just free weights at a reasonable price. The other thing is, I highly recommend this. If you can, I don't know if your job will pay for it or not, but just seeing a nutritionist.
Okay.
You could learn a lot of information, and they could tailor specifically to your needs, and some stuff that like you wouldn't necessarily know, you wouldn't necessarily think of, that could pay off dividends in the long run. So I would recommend a trip to the nutritionist if you can. And that the home gym stuff. So,
all right. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Our company has a much better wellness situation than I realized. Like I with all the working out that I'm doing and other like I'm doing like occupational wellness with like taking LinkedIn learning classes and things like that. So they actually have a nice incentive program where I'll get like gift cards at the end of each quarter where I could get up to like $300 worth of gift cards depending on how much like points I log depending on what I do. So I think I'm on pace to get like 150 or so bucks in gift cards, and I could use that towards like Southwest miles and treat me and my wife to like a nice trip next year somewhere for free. So that's kind of like another thing to like motivate myself and look forward to. So I'm hoping to stick with it, and that's kind of extra motivation for that. So
that's great, man. I wish you all the best in the world.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate it. And I don't see any other topics here. Like I said, I have to get going to the store, and then got to start work in less than an hour here. But any other final comments here before we wrap up?
So my NFL preview, the NFC came out on yesterday, and I have Philadelphia winning the NFC in my projection. The AFC will be out tomorrow, so you guys will just have to wait and see in terms of who I'm predicting to win the AFC and who I predict to win the Super Bowl.
Okay, so, and what I'll do is I'll link your
I'll send it to you.
tweet. I'll link your tweet to like responses to the original post here for the podcast, and then that should work. So Seth, once again, thanks for joining. You're always a pleasure to talk to, and everyone, thanks for listening once again. Good luck this year with all your bets, Seth, and enjoy some football starting in a couple days.
Thank you, Brian. Let's go Jets.
All right, yeah, JETS. All right, let's go.
Jets.
Take care. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, bye.